Welcome to Hilary Topper On Air, the podcast you can't afford to miss.
Are you a fan of pop art? Do you love Keith Haring, Andy Warhol, and Banksy? Want to start your own collection but not sure how to begin? I'm Hilary Topper, and this is Hilary Topper On Air. Today, I'm speaking with Jeff Jaffe, who is the owner and founder of Pop International Galleries in New York City. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Hilary. Thanks for having me on. It's wonderful to be with you.
So I know that you have an amazing background. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how Pop International Galleries came to life?
Sure. It's quite a little odyssey, really, in my having come to this country from South Africa some years ago, having gone to study art and sculpture, finished my master's degree at the Cranbrook Art Academy, which is still an absolute puzzle to me how I even got in there. And then coming to New York City, working as an artist, and eventually beginning to realized that the art gallery world was of great interest. I worked for a couple of very big gallery organizations, and one thing led to another, and wouldn't you know it, in 1997, Pop International was born.
So cool. So everyone knows that I love pop art, and I actually bought my first piece from Pop International Galleries. That was way back when. For someone interested in pop art, do you have any advice as to how he or she can get started?
Well, the first thing that I am sort of adamant about when it comes to people getting started in the art world in general is to, if they know that there's an interest and a desire to buy a piece of art, the thing to do would be to pop into some galleries, sort of identify some of the artists that that you might love or find interesting, and then develop a little bit of a relationship with an art dealer or an art gallery. And Pop International Galleries is a perfect space for that, because much of how we function and develop our client base is about this process of demystifying art, the buying of art. And if you know that you like Andy Warhol, then this would be a great place to come. If you know that you're interested in popular art that is derived from popular culture, then this would be a great place to stop into and meet with one of our consultants.
Now, you represent a ton of unique and talented pop artists. Can you talk about some of your favorites?
That's a tough question to ask any art dealer. The joke is always, what's your favorite piece of art in your gallery? Well, the one that just sold. But,
right.
But no, I would never have ever imagined, actually, at the time that we even opened this gallery, that I was terribly interested in pop art per se, but we had identified a niche, there was no question. And as it's developed over the years, I can certainly say that Keith Haring was perhaps one of my all-time favorite artists who I had the privilege of beginning to represent at Pop, for a number of reasons, really. One, I remember when I was in art school and I was back in New York City, and I was on a subway, and Keith's subway drawings were sort of all over the city. And I was sitting on a train, and there was a beautiful chalk drawing that Keith had done. And I saw this construction worker sort of lean up against it, put his foot on the wall. He had an itchy back, and he sort of like scratched his back. And as he was scratching his back, he was sort of erasing the original Keith Haring. And those Keith Haring subway drawings today are some of the most desired, incredibly wanted pieces of art in the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was sort of it sort of stayed with me, resonated with me. And as a consequence, when I had the opportunity to start to represent the Haring and the estate of Keith Haring and all that, I always went back to that story.
Hmm. Now, how do you actually find artists you represent? So my producer told me an interesting story about how you met one of your artists, You Are New York. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. We meet artists in many, many ways. From referrals, people coming in. We have a submissions section on our artwork on our website for Pop International. But this was a particularly interesting story. I got a phone call from a really good collector of ours who'd been buying a lot of art over the years. And he said, Jeff, I have these two guys who I think you should meet. Their work is really great. You should just have a meeting with them. So I said, okay, Mike, where are they? Who are they? And he gave me their names. He told me they were in Bushwick. This was about 10 years ago. So I ventured into Bushwick, and because it sure ain't what it is today. And I got into this really interesting sort of loft space with these two guys. And I could tell immediately that the work that was hanging around the space was particularly interesting for various reasons, and that I thought immediately that I was going to put them into the gallery. But there's a process. So I walked into the kitchen of this loft, and they had on the one side of the table, they had Dunkin' Donuts and coffee ready for me. And then on the other side, they had a big bottle of Hennessy. They didn't know, who they were dealing with. So I picked out my donut and my coffee, and we sort of walked around the space. And as I said, I knew immediately that they were going to be part of the Pop Gallery. Their names, they are a duo, street art team that goes by the name of You Are New York, letter U, letter R, New York. And I said, okay, boys, I can tell you right now, I think there's an opportunity to put you into the gallery, and it would be a privilege. I said, but there are a couple of things that we're going to have to straighten out first. And they sort of like looked at each other, and they looked at me, and I said, well, so they said, what? So I said, okay, the 39 indictments that you have against you, and the 5 years probation that you have? And they're like, their eyes widened, and they said, well, how do you know about all that? And I said, oh, Mike told me, Mike, who referred me to you. And they said, well, how would Mike know that? And I was sort of silent for a moment because I was a little bit baffled. And it dawned on me that they really didn't know what Mike did for a living. And I had to decide at that moment whether I was going to out Mike or not. And I decided to out Mike. And I said, well, I got to tell you guys that Mike is the undercover cop that has arrested you over the years for vandalism and graffiti. And they almost passed out. And they sort of jumped up and down, hooting and hollering. I knew he was a cop. Yeah. I'm going, yeah. And so Mike indeed was the undercover cop who had them picked up for various things. They never saw him. It was always a uniformed guy who would do the actual arrests. And then Mike sort of got to know them, and not in the capacity of being a policeman at the time, but to start buying and collecting their artwork, which he did. And I mean, he has a phenomenal collection of their work, and the rest is history. It's a classic New York story. It could only happen in New York.
Absolutely. That's an awesome story. All right. Before we move on, I just have to say that I am so appreciative of our sponsors, and I must thank them. Please support our sponsors and tell them that you heard about them on Hilary Topper On Air. Special thanks to the Russo Law Group, MetPro, Once Again Nut Butter, and Fortunoff Fine Jewelry. So Jeff, back to you. I've heard that since the gallery opened, you've never signed a formal contract with an artist. Everything is done with a handshake. Can you elaborate with that?
Can you imagine?
No.
So yeah, historically, over the 21 years that this gallery has been in business, I've sort of always thought that it was a much better way to do things, to sort of follow one's moral compass and try and do things in a way that were more based on this notion of a good handshake or a hug, and I said, let's see what we can do. And those boys, Mike and Fernando from UR New York, that
Mhm.
it's a perfect example of, you know, a 10-year relationship that was just really in the beginning, a handshake and a hug, and put your art in the gallery. And when these were guys who were selling their art on the street for $50 a piece, and we're getting, you know, $25,000, $30,000 for some of their paintings today. It's quite remarkable,
Well,
really.
their work is unbelievable. It's gorgeous.
It is.
So tell us, when someone walks into pop, what can they expect to find?
So the gallery is always hung in a way that we consider to be very inviting. And by that I mean the notion of pop art and pop culture and street art and all of that, which we're known for, is very attractive. Our windows always sort of done up well so people can get a sense of what the gallery is about. Our logo is sort of this global logo that people have really, really come to
Mhm.
be fond of. But when you arrive at the gallery, you're going to walk into the space and you're going to see bits and pieces of all the artists that we represent if we're not in the middle of a show. And it gives one a tremendous sense of who and what this company is, what this art gallery is. Full of color, there's always music playing. It's very casual in a sense, in that, you know, I don't wear a suit and tie, and I don't sit behind a big counter where you can't see me or anybody, and I'm not looking at your shoes or your jewelry to see whether I should talk to you or not. Or our salespeople here, we have this low front desk where people see us, they're made to feel welcome, and they come into this space, and they even if they don't land up buying something that day, most people leave here having had a really sort of lovely experience, full of fun and color and music, and you know, that's sort of what we strive for.
Love it. And do you have any fun exhibits opening soon, or new artists you're working with?
Well, one of the newer artists that we're dealing with is actually not that new, but he is the newest, most successful artist that we've placed in the gallery in a long time. His name is Craig Allen.
Mm.
Craig is this most gifted human being, and he's also a really lovely guy, which to me is part of that thing about
Mm-hmm.
no contracts. Craig and his agents and I are all good friends, and it's all been a handshake and lots of love and support. And Craig's work at the moment is the number one. He is the number one selling artist in our gallery, and I truly recommend everybody to sort of come down to Pop and take a look at his work. He creates paintings out of photographs of people that he takes from the roof of his studio. And then those photographs are scaled down to just about an inch or so. And he puts them together to create the most unbelievably complex paintings that represent, well, they really pay sort of a homage to celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, or famous superheroes like Superman or Wonder Woman. And he puts together these paintings made out of these tiny little figures. And if you step back, you see completely what it is. And when you step forward, every little bit of pop culture and relative material that connects to the painting that he's making is included. And I'll quickly add that he understands that a celebrity like Marilyn Monroe can't be who she is without us. And so all of these little people that sort of make up this portrait of Marilyn Monroe is a group of people that it's us. She can't be who she is without us. Or
Mm.
there's a lovely painting I'm looking at right now of people moving blocks and stripes and stars to actually form what is clearly the American flag. And again, it's that notion of this sort of broad populace where the flag of America can't be what it is without us, the people, we the people, in some sort of simplistic way. But as simplistic as it is, it's rather complex to sort of understand it in a broader context about how complex these paintings truly are. He is a genius, in my opinion, absolute genius. And he's poised for greatness. He's already been put into a museum in the South. He's originally from
Wow.
Atlanta. He is, you know, when art gets started to be collected by hedge funds and celebrities and all of those kinds of visible collectors, you sort of know that he's on the way to doing really well. And as I say, he's our #1 selling artist at the moment.
Absolutely. I took a picture, I think, when I was at your gallery of him, of his Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
And that was awesome. I mean, they're all awesome. They're amazing.
Yeah. The Mickey Mouse painting is fantastic.
So tell us a little bit about what you think the next art movement is.
So that's a wonderful question, because academics sort of pontificate about the art world and what it's made up of and what the next movement is. And again, both as an artist, as a teacher, as an art dealer, it's very clear to me that the very end of sort of what we would define as a major art movement would have been the pop movement. You know, Andy Warhol,
Mm-hmm.
Roy Lichtenstein, all of those sort of big names.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, there've been these sort of funny little things like neo-expressionism and whatnot. And they've just sort of been attempts to try and put artists into sort of little pockets to sort of, in some obtuse way, describe a new art movement. And I am convinced that since the pop art movement from the 60s and 70s, really, which fundamentally ended with the passing of Andy Warhol, there's been really nothing but a pluralistic view of the art world. Pluralism was sort of really what it was all about. However, with the advent of street art and street culture and whatnot, I am very clear in my head that a very identifiable, academically viable manifestation of what's going on in the art world is the street art that we see all over the world. And one of the most amazing things for me is to see, I like to use the term, instead of inside out, I like to use the term outside in, where all this art from the outside is now making its way inside into art galleries and in turn into people's homes. It is a global phenomenon, absolutely.
Awesome. So switching gears a little bit, as a business owner, I always love to hear advice from other entrepreneurs. Do you have any advice for a small business owner?
Well, you know, the small business concept is a complicated one, mostly it's more so complicated in a city like New York, where rents are incredibly high, insurance is just astonishing, all the sort of things behind the scenes that most people don't take into consideration when they might walk into a small business. The advice that I can give to anybody is to don't stretch yourself to the limit where you're unable to function in ways that make the success of your business become secondary. Your focus should be really what it is that you do, and everything else should be in place, which is not to say that there aren't bumps and bruises along the way and ups and downs, because that's just normal for any business, small or large. But the idea is to sort of stabilize yourself in a way that what you sell or represent is, if at all possible, wholly unique. I run a small business with a logo, as I said earlier, that's just global. People want it on T-shirts and cups. It's just hilarious.
Yep.
They do identify with this logo, a logo, and people will walk into the gallery and go, "Oh, I know this. I've seen it, here, there, anywhere." When you can also sort of, when you walk along Spring Street towards the Bowery, you can see our space literally from 10 blocks away
Mm-hmm.
because of the logo. So all of those sort of little things that you've got to get into place, a good logo, a good business plan, um, preparation for the ups and downs, that's sort of I never went to business school. I went to art school. So it's sort of a funny way for me to talk about business in some ways.
Absolutely. Well, if you are ever in New York City, I would highly suggest going to Pop International Galleries on the Bowery. It is magnificent, and you'll see some amazing artists there, and you'll meet Jeff Jaffe. Finally, Jeff, before we close, can you tell us how our listeners can learn more about Pop International Galleries and the artists you represent?
Absolutely. We have a beautiful website, just www.popinternational.com. It's a fairly comprehensive site. It's a little bit more detailed than most art gallery websites, and that has to do with the fact that I want people to have access to information. So the website is absolutely wonderful. I would certainly say that social media is also a great way to learn a little bit more about us. Instagram, we have a nice following on Instagram and Facebook. People love our Instagram page. We spend time and effort to make sure that people have access to this information. Or you could just pick up the phone, and ask for me or anybody in the gallery. Our art consultants are trained and capable, and it's a fun space. Come on down.
Yeah, and it's definitely worth going. So again, if you're in New York City, no matter where you live, definitely put that on your bucket list, Pop International Galleries. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the show. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Russo Law Group, MedPro, once again, Nut Butter, and Fortunoff Fine Jewelry. And last but not least, I want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. If you want more information on this show or any other show, visit our new website at hilarytopperonair.com, or find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Mixcloud, you name it, we're out there. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome to Hilary Topper On Air, the podcast you can't afford to miss.